Comparisons. We all make them. They're rarely helpful. We try to determine how we're doing when we compare ourselves to others. As a mom, a wife, a friend, a daughter-in-law. But when we compare, we're not recognizing that God has a unique story for each of us. We try to measure ourselves by others' stories. This year, we at MOPS International want to challenge you to embrace your story, to wrap your arms around your unique circumstances, personality, and family, and say, we are enough. I am enough. I might be a mess, but I'm a beautiful mess. In my book, The Artist's Daughter, I talk about my own struggles with comparison when I was a brand new mom. I know just how tempting it can be to fall into that trap. And I hope my story gives you some freedom to think honestly about yours. Better yet, to share honestly with those sitting around you about yours. My friend and fellow mother of preschoolers, Shauna Niequist, also knows about comparisons. I have a chance to talk with her about this thing we do when we compare ourselves to other moms. I think you'll find her a trusted comrade fighting against the lies that can creep into our heads as we watch others and wonder why we never measure up. Comparisons are part of my story, part of Shauna's story. How are they part of your story? So here I am with Shauna, and like I said, we're going to talk about Shauna and comparisons. So we have a few questions we're going to ask her, and we're just going to dive on in. Shauna, we're talking about comparison. Is this something you've experienced?
Well, I think it's something that all women experience. I think it's really, I don't know exactly why, but I think moms especially are particularly vulnerable to it. And I absolutely am. To be totally honest, there are some things that are don't really trip me up. Like, I feel decent about the way it's going in my life, doesn't really bother me. However, when I meet a woman who is in really, really amazing physical shape, it's really easy for me to compare and come out on the losing end of that one. When I meet women or moms, especially who are well rested, when they talk about like massages or naps, I instantly feel like this haggard, circles under my eyes, sort of frantic, unkempt person. And then when people's children are exceptionally well behaved, every once in a while that kind of trips my buttons and I think like, oh yeah, well, aren't they darling? Yeah, mine are on the floor right now. Oh look, mine is eating garbage. So those tend to be the areas where I am pretty vulnerable. So I would say appearance, schedule or pace, and then well-behavedness of children. That can be one that I don't always come out on the winning end of that one. But I think it's a really damaging way to live. When you're walking through your life and it's always win or lose, it's always me or her, it's always better or best, I think that's a really exhausting, really soul-damaging way to live. I think we do it all the time, but I think it hurts us more than we think.
And those areas, do you think that they're triggers for you because those are the places where you feel like you could do better, or you feel like you're falling short, and so they're just automatically your trigger spots?
Oh, absolutely. I think any of our vulnerable places, the places that we feel particularly insecure or we don't really have it all together, I think it's less even about those women as it is about those kind of soft or tender or bruised places in each one of us. I think actually when you look at the comparison games you're playing, you can learn a lot about kind of what's off balance or what needs to be healed in your own life. You think it's about her, it's about her, it's about her, it's about us, and it's about the things in our lives that need to be shifted or repaired or healed in some way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, I know totally clean house. It's so intimidating to me because I am not a good housekeeper. So when I walk into a woman's house and I see she has kids the same age as mine and somehow we live in different universes because their toys are all put away.
Yes.
Yeah.
I understand this.
Yeah.
A friend of mine said, I think this is so wise. She said, when you have people over to your house, the true goal should be that they leave feeling better about themselves, not better about you. And I think that's such a good reminder, and it really helps me because I feel a little bit the same. Like, I've got boys and they're just filthy, and I'm not great at that stuff anyway. And now I have her words in my head and I think, you know what? I bet a lot of people feel great about themselves when they come to my house, and so that makes me feel a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. What helps you out of the trap of comparisons when you find yourself going that direction?
For me, I think when I think about comparison, I think the thing that heals me the most, that helps me, that kind of pulls me out of that, is connection. Comparison is so isolating. You're in your own head, you're in your own mind, everything's a win or lose, and you feel disconnected from the people that you're comparing yourself to, probably to your own deep sense of value. And so I found I do a better job of not comparing myself to other people when I really feel connected to God, and particularly to His love for me. Whether you've been a Christian for a long time or you're just starting the process of walking with God in even just very beginning ways, the heart of it all, the beginning, like the number one thing is His love for us. He made us. He made us on purpose. He designed each one of us a particular way. And a lot of times for reasons we don't totally understand. But I think that's the heart of it for me. When I can get out of my crazy mind and get out of all that comparison, and when I can remind myself, God made me. He shaped my experiences. He gave me this body. He gave me this life and these children. And for whatever reason, He wanted this to be my story and my life. It's not perfect. It's not better. It's not best, but it's mine. And when I can remind myself of His great love for me, when I think about my boys, if they were to say, I hate this about myself and he does this so much better, it would break my heart because I love the way they are. We just think they're amazing. And I think that's how God looks at us. He thinks like, why would you ever compare yourself to someone else? I made you on purpose to be just like that. And you would throw it away if you could. You would be like her if you could. It's got to be maddening for someone who created us with such great love, who looks at us with such great affection, to see us wanting so badly to be different than who we are. So the first thing I think is getting myself back to a place where I remind myself back at the very beginning, this is about love. You are deeply loved. Even though you would have made yourself really different if you had the opportunity, the way God made you is the way He made you on purpose. And there's so much love and affection that He feels for just the way that He made you. The second thing that helps me a little bit is really connecting to my own sense of purpose. I think a lot of times when we're comparing ourselves with other people, we want to live their story. We want our days to look like their days. We want to live out their purpose or their mission or their calling. And especially when you have little kids, I think if you had a particular career and it's shifting a little bit now that you're in little kid world, sometimes you have to kind of rediscover that sense of your own purpose. But I think that's a really important, really worthwhile process. So, for me, I told you one of the things I get a little bit I compare myself a little bit when I am around women or moms of little kids who seem to me to have lots of leisure time. That sort of gets me. I get all like, why am I so busy? And why am I always like so late and disheveled all the time? Why am I always the mom who's like not, her kids are not having like craft day or something because we're just like going to Target. That's what we do,
because their bottoms are in their car seats all day long while we drive home.
And so when there are women who I feel like have more time than I do, I get really wigged out about that. And then I remind myself, hey, I feel called to be a writer. I feel like it's something that God has given me the opportunity to do. I feel strongly about it. I feel really thankful for it. What that means is I don't have as much leisure time. What that means is I don't have as many kind of unplanned hours in the day. But that's part of my purpose. And so I think when you have a sense for what your purpose is, it can help you out of that spiral of I want what she has, I want my day to look like her days, I want my schedule to look like hers. It helps me stay grounded in that sense of like, this is what I signed up for. This is what God is asking from me and what I'm happy to give to Him. And then the third thing is, and I think, maybe this is the most important kind of day to day, is the connection that you maintain with other women. It's easy to get to a point where you're seeing other women only as measures against which you're judging yourself. She's this, and she's that, and she's that, and I'm this, and this is how the math works. But when you take the time to get to know those women, when you know their story and what they're afraid of, or the things that they feel vulnerable about, you start to see them as whole people, and you start to see kind of their loveliness and their quirkiness, and you stop regarding them just as better or worse. And I think the connection is what keeps us from the competition and the comparison. So for me, my connection, my relationships with other women, and especially seeing their more vulnerable sides and showing them my more vulnerable sides is what saves me a lot of time from getting caught in that terrible comparison game.
So going back to purpose, what if a woman isn't really sure what her purpose is? How does she discover that?
I think at least what I'm learning, and I'm totally not an expert on it, but in this season, I take it in 1-year chunks. I don't know if it's helpful to say, like, what did God make me to do forever? What is my identity and purpose for the long haul? But I can say, like, okay, this school year, this is what I'm about. And so I would say start with a 1-year chunk. And I would say start alone. Start with your journal. Start with an hour at a coffee shop. What are the things I already know? What are the commitments I've already made? What are sort of the non-negotiables about our family life? And then with the wiggle room outside of that, what are the things that I feel uniquely called and able to do in this particular context? And then I would say once you have a couple ideas of how that looks on your own, invite your husband and your closest friends into that process. One thing that I've been really surprised about is a lot of times they know better than I do what my purpose is, or what would be something that would be a really valuable endeavor for me, or what isn't working in a particular season. A lot of times I'll kind of try the same thing over and over and over, and then someone will finally say, hey, guess what?
Not really working.
I'm going to tell you that this is not working, and I think you know that, but you don't want to admit it. Some of those conversations are really painful, but they're really necessary. And so I think it's really worth spending the time. I don't do a great job of that. I just kind of keep going and going and going and then wonder why it's not working. I'm starting to get better at taking the time alone to listen, to pray, to write. What is it that I feel like is my purpose for this year? The things that I'm already committed to, the family commitments that I've already made, and then the other opportunities for life and ministry and connection and whatever. And then to invite the closest people in my life to go through that process with me. They always tell me things that maybe secretly I know, but I'm not quite ready to say out loud. And those are really helpful conversations.
You told me earlier that your family has a practice of gratitude and that helps you in the comparison department. Can you tell us about that?
It seems to me that if comparison is essentially, it's all about what you don't have, what you are not, what you can't do, what you can't measure up to. Gratitude is the opposite. Gratitude is being thankful for what you have, regardless of what you don't. This is what is, and I'm thankful for what is. This is what we have today, and I'm thankful for what we have today. And so, our kids are little. I wouldn't say they're grasping like the totally finer points of this, but around the dinner table, which does not happen every day by any means, but when we all gather around the table, one thing we do is we say, what's one thing that you're thankful for today? And it can be anything. It can be something that happened that day, or it can be something we have in our lives. My son has one uncle that he's always the most thankful for. So no matter what happened, even if he hasn't seen him for a long time, like, oh, Uncle Brad. In all the world, I'm so thankful for Uncle Brad. And we're like, well, whatever. That's a good thing to be thankful for. But that practice, especially toward the end of the day, regardless of where my mind and heart have been all day, even if I've been totally in that mental space that only sees what we don't have, what I'm not getting right, what I'm not living up to, we gather at the table and we say, there are things to be thankful for. And that practice really brings us back, I think, out of comparison into thankfulness.
What's one thing any of us can do to help our community or MOPS group out of this pattern, kind of the group think?
I think there are some they seem like really small things, but they're really big things. There are a lot of ways in which our language with each other, especially as we talk about mothering, kind of promotes are you living up to my standard? Who's better? Who's competing? Who's the best? Or says, essentially we can either use our language to compare, or we can use our language to connect. And those are two really different things. So we have a baby boy, he's 15 months old now, and right before Christmas, he's like running, and he's fearless, and he likes to climb, and he has absolutely no sense of fear or danger about anything. And so we call him the unicorn because he always has a bump on his head, like all the time, like right here, just constantly. And right before Christmas, he fell and he hit his little right here on our coffee table, and he got this total black eye. And then the next day he was at church, and they called me and they said, oh, I have to tell you something. Matt got a black eye. And I was like, oh, no, he already had a black eye. They were like, the other one. He fell on a little slide. And so he had 2 full black eyes right before Christmas. And a friend of mine said, like, maybe no Sunday school this week. Like, you're going to bring your kid into Sunday school with 2 black eyes. And my dad's the pastor at our church, and my husband's a worship leader. So it's not like a totally anonymous situation that I'm generally walking into. But I was like, I'm not going to be one of those moms that doesn't bring her kids to church because these little black eyes, like, this happens. He just like fell down, like whatever, And so I brought him in, and the first volunteer I saw said, Mom, what did you do to that boy? And
affirming.
Yeah. And I wanted to kick her in the shins. And I felt ashamed, and I felt judged, and I felt like she was trying to imply, well, maybe not imply, said specifically, what did you do to your kid? And it made me feel defensive, and it made me feel competitive, and it made me want to find something wrong with her parenting, and it made me want to compare in another way and win. And so I'm all wound up, and I just like, And then I see another mom, a little bit older, and she says, oh, look at those eyes. My boys are grown now, but I brought a black eye to Sunday school every week for 3 years, I think. And I just felt like, oh, thank you. Thank you for connecting with me and not comparing yourself to me. Thank you for making space for the place where I'm insecure. Thank you for making me feel like I'm not a bad mom because I have a kid who falls down sometimes. And that felt like, so I, drop the kids off and I get to my seat and I just thought, like, that's the deal, right? I want to be like that mom. I want to look for ways to tell other moms, you're doing great. You are totally knocking it out of the park. You're doing fine. Your kids are normal. This is how it is. Those voices are like water in a desert, especially for those of us who feel like we're not always measuring up, like we're trying and falling short, like our kids are always the ones with like booger noses and black eyes. My kids always are. And so I think each of us can decide to be the mom that says things like, oh, so he's not really a talker. Or, wow, does he have a lot of energy? I love that. I love how he's playing right now. But it's those tiny little things, and we do them all the time. And sometimes we don't even realize it. But, I have a friend who constantly is on me about how many words does he have? Do you feel concerned? And, well, I wasn't concerned, but every time you bring it up, I get concerned. I feel like we can be moms who give each other space and give each other grace and give each other permission. And then what we do is we move out of comparison into connection. We say like, hey, you're trying as hard as I am. It's hard, isn't it? Instead of, hey, you're really not living up to my standard. I'm winning right now. It feels like really subtle language things, but I think they're really important.
And I would think that nursery worker who said something about the eyes, she was probably joking.
Oh, totally, yeah.
And didn't even think that it was coming out that way.
Totally.
And I can think of all the times I kind of make flippant, maybe a little bit sarcastic remarks that are meant to be funny, but really they're meant to make me feel better about myself and put somebody else down.
And it's so easy to do that.
And it's not a conscious thing, but it's there.
But I think the more we can be really intentional and careful with our language and kind of cycle through that, even at the end of the day, I'm trying to practice. When I lay in bed at night, I think through all of my interactions and I think like, what was I doing there? What was I trying to do there? I have a friend who just brought up in conversation casually her son's standardized test scores. That probably didn't need to get brought up right then, but she needs for us to know that stuff. So I'm always on the lookout for ways that I'm doing that I'm making less space and more comparisons with other moms. I want to be the kind of mom that creates more space, more opportunities, more permission. But it's just in those tiny little moments. We do it all the time.
And asking yourself, how can I change and put the focus back on me and realize and being honest, because that's painful sometimes to be honest about. I wasn't the best friend in that moment, but I could be better next time.
Totally.
If you were to give moms one practical thing, what would it be?
I know this sounds maybe potentially unpopular or kind of boring, but I have been finding in my own life and in the conversations that I have with other people, specifically other moms, I'm not totally sure that the amount of time I've been spending online is helpful for my own sense of contentment with my own life and my tendency to compare myself to the lives and the images that I see online. Actually just was reading an article this morning and it says that 1 out of 3 people after they look at Facebook feel more sad and more lonely than they did before they started. And I totally get that. I think a couple different things are going on. Number one, you never check Facebook when you're having like your own peak experience. It's not like you're at the top of the Eiffel Tower and you're like, oh, I do wonder what my friends are doing. You check Facebook when you have downtime, when nothing particularly exciting is going on. And so you're kind of in this like vulnerable, lonely, like my life is not so amazing kind of space. You're like, I could fold this laundry, but I'll just scroll through Facebook super fast. And then one of your friends is at the Eiffel Tower, or her husband took her to Maui, or she just won such and such prize. Like something amazing always seems to be happening in someone else's life when you're sitting there surrounded by your laundry. And I don't know if that's super helpful for us. I have been finding that the less time I spend online, the more content I am with my actual life, with my actual house, with my actual friends, and the way we actually spend our time. I think Facebook is tricky. I think even blogs sometimes, and I'm a blogger, so I know I'm kind of part of the problem, but there is, to a certain extent, you can show pictures. You can make anything look beautiful in a picture. You can make anything look beautiful in a story. You can edit. I think that's what it is. You can put beautiful filters, or you can edit anything online. And you can keep the ugly or unfinished or messy parts of your house or your life or your story completely out of the picture. And what that communicates to the rest of us is that they aren't there. My house always looks like this. My kids are always this cute. My life is always this happy. And for those of us, especially when we're in seasons that are not like that at all, it can feel sort of like this unrelenting parade of how beautiful that is, how wonderful that is. This is not how my life is right now. And I think it keeps us from being thankful and present for what we have in our own lives and in our own homes. And frankly, I think Pinterest might be the most unhelpful, although let's just be totally honest that none of us are doing any of the things that we've pinned. I think that would be helpful. No one I know has ever made a coffee table out of a palette, ever. No one is making salads in mason jars. I mean, it's an absurd thing to do anyway, make a salad in a bowl. But it's this kind of imaginary space where we say, this is how life ought to be. Why? What if the most beautiful, extraordinary things that are going to happen in your life are happening in your actual house right now, but you're missing them because you're pinning things mindlessly that you're never going to do? I'm pinning kitchens I'm never going to have the money to have. I'm pinning vacation sites I'm never going to visit. And it doesn't make me feel more thankful for what I have. It makes me feel more aware of what I don't have. And I'm not, I'm a blogger. I love Facebook and Twitter. I communicate with a lot of friends that way. I'm not down on those things, but I do find when there are times when I'm feeling really vulnerable to what I don't have, or to ways that I'm not measuring up, or the ways that my life feels like it's not all the things I imagine it being, the worst thing for me to do is to open my computer and to dive into everyone else's carefully edited, sparkly world. The best thing for me to do is to close my laptop and to get down on the floor with my kids and be with them, the actual people actually growing in my home. Or to call a friend and actually have a human conversation about what's great and what's hard and what's boring and what's whatever. Mm-hmm. The human connection is so much more valuable than the edited online version of our lives. And I think sometimes we confuse the two. So it sounds sort of lame and boring, but I think in the last 2 years, I've done two kind of a couple trips where I just was completely not online at all. And I felt so much better about my life than I did when I'm constantly seeing what this person just bought, or the restaurant they ate at, or the food they just took a picture of, or the trip they just went on. I feel so much more thankful when there aren't quite so many voices vying for my attention, and I can really focus on the life that we're building. Not particularly glamorous, not particularly exciting, but it's ours, and it's happening around our coffee table, in our house, with our children. That really helps me sometimes.
You mentioned when figuring out your purpose that a good exercise is to talk about the things you know you have to do, the non-negotiables, and then looking at the rest of your life and seeing where there's some room. What do you say to moms who feel like, I just don't have any space in my life?
Totally. I have felt that feeling. And to be perfectly honest, my biggest goal for this coming year is to create more space, is to say no to things, even good things. There have been seasons when I've looked at the year and I've said, this is what God's asking me to do. This writing project, or this leadership role, or this volunteer opportunity. And frankly, this season, when I took some time away to pray, when I talked with the other people in my life, my biggest commitment for this year is saying no. My biggest act of obedience is saying no, to slow down a little bit. And that means saying no to family things. It means saying no to things at my kids' school. It means saying no to work things. So sometimes I think you're in a season where you need a little bit of permission to slow everything down, to be more present to what is. And then sometimes you're in a season where you need a little bit of a push to move forward into a new volunteer role, or a new job, or a new way of interacting in your community. And I think that's what you find out along the way as you go through that process of discerning your purpose. And again, I know on one hand, moms are the busiest people I know. On the other hand, they're also the most efficient. Moms get it done. They can do a million more things in a day, I think, than the average person. And so there is sometimes more time than we think. And I've found this to be true in my life. Most of the time, when I feel like God's calling me to something, there's never just extra time laying around that I happen to find. It always comes when I have to say no, sometimes to really good things. I have to stop doing other things. Sometimes you have to disappoint people. Sometimes you have to have awkward conversations. Sometimes you have to let people think a little bit less of you. But you have to find the space from somewhere to do those things that you're called to do, because without it, you'll never have that sense of, this is what I was made for. You'll end up resenting all the busyness and all the commitments, because essentially you're just responding to other people's voices. What I'm hoping to do is to respond to the voice of God's Spirit as it's unfolding in my life. And if I can do that, then disappointing the other voices outside of that is a lot easier. So to start with, what are the things that I think God has called me to in this particular season? And sometimes the answer is He's called me to say a lot of really hard no's. That's where I am right now. But in other seasons, He's calling me to take on a really new challenge. And so I think to give yourself the permission for you to be all over the map, for your answer to be really different than the other people in your group or different than the other people in your life, but to give yourself the permission to listen to and act on that voice.
I do hear that a lot of purpose that we are talking about right now has to do with doing. Do you think a mom ever has a season where her purpose is to, say, be more courageous, or to face the shame in my life that I'm trying to face, or something that isn't necessarily have to do with do, but with be and accepting God's love?
You know, I would say a lot of times we use busyness as a way to defend ourselves from some of the things we need to handle inside of our lives. And frankly, as moms of young kids, it's such an acceptable addiction to a certain extent. It's totally socially acceptable to be like, man, I'm just busy from morning till night. I could never pay attention to whatever's kind of knocking on the door of my soul. I'm so busy with my kids. But really, what your kids need more than anything is a whole, healthy parent who's facing the things that they need to face, who's courageous, who's taking the time to dig into their past or some of the unfinished business that life has brought them. And so I think one of the most significant decisions that we can make as moms is to pursue a healthy, whole self in all the different ways: physical, spiritual, emotional, relational, psychological. It's hard to do that, and a lot of the messaging of our culture says, just stay busy, just keep running your kids around, just keep on top of everything, just make sure the laundry is done, just make sure they're getting this. And I read a quote this Christmas that just absolutely floored me. It said something like, it's really easy in our culture for us to confuse love with efficiency, or to administrate our kids as an act of loving them. And I realize so often that I do that. I'm the one who's making sure they have backpacks packed and lunch is ready, and I've got their laundry done, and I've got their clothes organized. That's not the same thing as taking time to be with, and to listen to, and to play the same game for the 1,000th time in a row. I'm not as good at that. I'm good at keeping things in order. But what I'm trying to do this year is to slow down and let myself have those kind of unplanned moments, those not efficient moments, to be present with my kids instead of organizing them all the time. It's hard for me to do, but I think it's really important.
So Shauna, if you had one message you wanted to leave moms with, what would it be?
You know, when I think about each mom, what I wish I could do is I wish we could sit down for coffee, each one of us, and I wish I could look into your eyes, and if I could, this is what I would say. God made you, and He made you on purpose for a purpose, and His love for you is so extraordinary. It's the beginning of everything. It's the foundation of everything. This isn't about winning and losing. It isn't about being the best. It isn't about being better than, or trying harder than, or trying to prove that you can do more than. You are loved, period. What that means is there's no race, there's no prize, there's no competition. It doesn't matter if you win or if you lose, whatever comparison game you're playing in your head. I want you to feel a deep sense of God's affection for you, His great love for you. And out of that love, I want you to be able to extend that same love to the people around you, to give them grace, to let them stop running, to let them stop trying to be perfect, stop trying to do every single little thing. I think if each of us can find in ourselves a deep sense of God's love and can extend it to one another, then we can help each other. We can walk together instead of being competitive or playing the comparison game with one another. And I think if you and I could be each other's biggest cheerleaders as we mother, that would be a really beautiful thing.